Now, the last group that's going to speak to us today is the perspective from the flight instructors and aviation educators. They are all national instructors of the year, past national instructors of the year. They are all SAFE members. They are moderated. One is missing, and I guess, Mike, you'll talk about that. But our moderator is Mike Gaffney, National Instructor of the Year 2006. Seven. Number's difficult for me. Mike Gaffney.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. We have a heck of a panel up here today. We do have one person missing. I'd like to take a couple minutes, though, and talk about the panel that we've come together and kind of talk about the experience that they represent. Because the audience here today are the collective people that pointed towards the industry each year since back in '76 and '77 and tried to find a flight instructor and an AMT, a mechanic and an avionics tech and a aviation safety counselor, or a FAST representative as we know it today, that personified the professionalism that they wanted the rest of the industry to follow. And in 2007, I was doing my thing. I was running hard. It was right in the middle of Cirrus and the Aviation Integra and the G1000 coming out and landing in all kinds of platforms. And I was trying to do my thing and try to do it the best way I knew how. And when all of a sudden they stopped long enough to say, Mr. Gaffney, you know, you are going to be our 2007 National Flight Instructor of the Year, I stopped in my tracks because I was just doing what I thought I was supposed to do. And to be singled out and to go up on stage at Oshkosh and receive that award from Marion Blakey was a single high point of my entire career, of my life. And I am absolutely just amazed to be able to work with these three folks over here. Let me go ahead and kind of move along on this thing here. First of all, Arlen McMahon, National CFI of the Year 2009, Master Flight Instructor, FAST Lead Representative, SAFE member, and she's probably going to have a couple other things that she's going to talk about, things that she does, author, and Arlen and I had the great pleasure of working together at Quest Kodiak when we were brought together to put together our FITS compliant factory training program for that aircraft when it was being introduced. Another real thrill. So I'm really happy to have Arlen. Jeff Edwards, 2003 National Flight Instructor of the Year, runs a accident investigation company based in St. Louis. FAST member. He is a FAST representative as well as being a master instructor, and a number of things also he's going to tell you about. I had the great pleasure of working with Jeff in St. Louis on an FBO project that that consumed my life for 7 years, and I learned more about training and the mistakes that people make flying airplanes from this man right over here than anyone I've met in my 34.5 years in aviation. So I'm just absolutely thrilled to have him. And down on the end, last but not least, Jeffrey Robert Mossy, the 2010 National Flight Instructor of the Year, doing a lot of single pilot turbine work, working for the AOPA seminar series. He's all over the country. Many of you have probably seen him speak, seen his presentations. Another one of these dynamo types that are in aviation that we all aspire to follow around and listen to and learn from every single day. So what we're going to do over the next hour, we're going to talk for, let each of these folks do their presentation, and then what we're going to do is kind of wrap up with a quick summary and then take a lot of these ideas we're going to be talking to into the breakout sessions tomorrow. Before I go any further with that, I just want to look at some of the major themes at this group. And we've been having conference calls. We started 2 months ago. Every other Tuesday we did a conference call, and we got together and we talked about what we were going to talk about, what our presentations were, what our issues were in this industry, what were we going to stand up in front of this esteemed group here and talk about, what were we going to take to our breakout panels. Then over the last month we moved to a weekly format. So we really thought these things through. And we thought about the issues and the great paradox that we have in aviation today. What paradox am I talking about? First of all, we have a room filled with professionals. If you weren't professionals, you wouldn't be here. All right? We just happen to be a couple of lucky people that got singled out to be excellent in what we did in a particular year. But this room is filled with National Flight Instructors of the Year and also National Safety Counselors or Fast Reps or National Avionics Technicians of the Year. Would anyone that's ever received a National General Aviation Award please raise their hand? Okay, so that's a great, at least a significant percentage of this group. So we've got the right people in this room to make the changes we're talking about. But what's this paradox? The paradox is this room is filled with people who have their own ideas about how to do it right. Because we have the passion and we have the belief that there's only one right way to do it. So what's the other side of the paradox? We know there's 93 some odd flight instructors out there, 93,000. And Jeff is going to talk about that in his presentation. What are they doing and where are they? Okay, well that's a great question, and that's a great question that fast lead representatives all over the country are asking themselves when they give these monthly and bi-monthly safety presentations. Where are the flight instructors? Where are all these people? The people that are showing up to these meetings are the same ones that are the fast lead reps that you're going to see in this room. They're the ones that are driving the safety initiatives and working closely with the FAA and these other groups that you see in this room. What about master instructors? Do we have any master flight instructors in this room today? Master instructors, master ground instructors, master aerobatics instructors. We now have a master glider instructor program that's just been initiated. Okay, same type of thing. The mere way that the master instructor program has been conceived and continues to be conceived is that it takes people that are normally leaning forward in their seats saying, I want to be the best that I can be in what I do. You almost don't pay attention to anyone else around you. You're going to do whatever you have to do to keep doing what you're doing because you believe in it, but then you have this record-keeping thing, and then you submit that portfolio in, and then you get recognized as a master instructor again. I think the count we saw in one of the slides earlier was there are 600 master flight instructors right now in the country out of 93,000 flight instructors in the system. Okay, so a large paradox. One last example I just want to kind of give out to you. It's just a small story. Whenever I travel to cities, I always walk in the FBO. I want to see what does it look like. What are they doing? So I was at a small city in Florida the other day, a small airport. I'm not going to tell you where. And I walked in. It was a Part 61 operation. And I walked and looked around, and they had all these nicely clothed flight instructors. You could obviously tell who they were. They had the bars on their, the epaulets on and everything. And so I walked in, and I was trying to see, well, it looks pretty clean, And so I went up to the counter and said I'm interested in getting checked out. And so the lady behind the counter says, oh, well, we have one of our senior flight instructors right over here. And I said, oh, okay, my name's Mike, and he told me his name was Bill or whatever. And so I said, what kind of aircraft do you have? And he says, well, there's the leaderboard. And I looked up there. I said, oh, you have a G1000 aircraft. And he says, yeah, we do. And I said, he goes, there it is right out there. And I look, and it was Echo Romeo. So it was a high time, probably 172 from Embry-Riddle that got moved down the line. And I said, great. What would it take to get checked out in that? well, do you have any pilot experience? And I said, yeah. He goes, do you have a private? And I go, yeah. And he says, well, we just have to go get in it and get on the schedule and go up and do a couple of takeoffs and landings, and that should be good. And I said, And, you know, and having written and worked with Jackie Spanitz for years upon end, and Tom Glista to try to come up with a FITS-accepted software program, 14 chapters on how to use the G1000 system, I was a little interested at how they could take people and just throw them into a G1000, you know, G1000 172, and that was all it was going to take. And I said, well, don't you use any kind of a preparation program to teach people about the avionics? And the guy kind of looked at me like I had 3 heads. And he says, why? And I said, well, do you have any kind of simulation or any kind of thing? Because, you know, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable just jumping in an airplane with avionics and just learning it by pressing buttons. And another CFI kind of stepped forward and says, we have a AATD upstairs, but no one really uses it. And I said, oh, really? I said, you don't make students go get an AATD to learn the avionics before you put them in the airplane. And he goes, well, the students wouldn't do it anyways. Okay, that's the paradox, folks. That's what we're dealing with. All right, and so I'm not saying that what any of us or any of us in this room are doing right, but I'm saying that that's the ugly, dark side of the aviation world as we know it today. And there's lots of economic reasons that it's like that, and there's lots of opportunistic, you know, reasons why it's like that. But that's the reality. All right, and so what we have to do. You know, we can sit here in our think tank in our ivory tower and come up with these great ideas, but unless we can figure out a way to get buy-in from these other organizations out there and these other flight instructors and give them a reason to buy into it, then we're not going to accomplish what we want to accomplish all the way around. All right? And short of Mr. Cintron over here in the FAA rolling out regulations or changing the PTS or telling DPEs you're going to do scenarios and you're going to do this and you're going to nail these guys and you're going to drop that gate down low to, you know, stop these flight instructors from sliding under into the system, we're not going to stop the bleeding. And that's a shame. Okay? Because I'm not giving up doing what I believe to be right, nor are any of these people here, nor is anyone in this room. That's where we're going. So, with that, we have some contact information. We'll make sure we get that out. Also, all the presentations you're going to see here today are going to be available on my website, flightlogics.com, but I think also we're going to have some on the Symposium one. So we'll have plenty of places you can get this stuff. So
keep going.
Professionalism, okay? We've got professionalism. We have to demand it. We've got to, first of all, demand it of ourselves. We have to set the example for the people around us. And when we walk into a Part 61 school like that, then what I should do is I should go back in there and say, you know what, I want to talk to your chief instructor. I want to talk to the owner here. And you know, try to get in there and see, man, you know, there's some other things that we could do. So we've got to get people over the idea that button pushing is the right way to learn. We know that the evolution of technology in the cockpit has been growing wildly for 10 years. Okay. And if we look at the Flintstones to the Jetsons, what I call the continuum between them, you know, you might think to yourself and say, well, if I've got a glass cockpit aircraft that has a single little blue button, and if I press that, it's actually going to right the aircraft, okay, that's probably pretty close to the concept of moving towards the Jetsons. Would everyone agree with that, compared to where we've been? But what would be an example in that same exact cockpit that's no further than the Flintstones? How about VHF communications? Where you still have to press a push-to-talk switch, you're making an analog transmission over a VHF frequency, and you're depending upon the ability of the person on the other end to interpret what you said, and then them to give you back some kind of a response, and then you to then read it back and then actually execute it. Okay? We aren't very much beyond the Flintstones in that regard, are we? Now, if we look at all of the new, the next gen, and what next gen is going to offer us, you know, 20 years from now, that may get us closer to the Jetsons kind of flying environments. But right now, we're not there. Many of us were taught to fly in aircraft like these. And, you know, heard someone say they learned to fly in the 80s, some in the 70s, someone else was in the 60s. And, you know, I learned to fly in 76. And this is what they looked like. But now we got to the airport, or you get people that actually have the money to hire a flight instructor that's willing to do the work, and this is what they're seeing. So you have an Integra 1. There you have R9 from the Aviation. There you've got the Garmin Perspective System. Those are all on Cirrus panels, okay? And with, you know, and I being a graduate from the CSIP program, you heard Travis talk about that earlier today, Mr. Klum. You know, that program is a phenomenal program, but it's very expensive. When I went through it, it was $5,000 of my own money to go up to Duluth. I had to sit there for a week, and I put myself in a hotel, and I had to go through it. Of the 93,000 flight instructors that are out there, how many people are going to be in a situation where they'd actually go do that? Then you may ask yourself, well, why would I have done it? Okay, because at the time, I was trying to get a Cirrus Training Center contract for my FBO. I was trying to go anywhere I could where I felt the growth was going. So at the time, it made sense. But I learned so much darn information about, not only about that aircraft, but about being scenario-driven, that led me straight to Tom Glista's door. And then that's when we started working on, what does FITS really mean? What is scenarios, and how do they work? And when you look at what FITS was really trying to do, and what it really still has a huge potential of doing, it can apply all the way across the flight training spectrum, because scenario or mission-based training has a relevant place even when we're doing task-based training. Okay, you can incorporate the two together in a scenario. You can teach stalls, you can teach upset recoveries, and all those other kind of things that are tasks in the PTS in the context of a scenario. You just have to be creative on how to do it. Okay, and Tom and the people on his team will probably tell you that there are some people out there that really do get scenario-based training, and the ones that do never give it up. Once they can get past the wall and figure out how to do the describe and explain and the manage the site and the way to do student-based or student-centric grading, it really does make sense. So here's the tale of this evolving training, and that's what we have to figure on our professionalism. If we were all trained in the simple cockpit, like over on the left, and I guess that's not so simple, it has a 430 and a 530 in it, and then you move over here, and I just happen to show a picture of a Seminole, okay, because I've got a lot of DA-42 time from Diamond, and you know, those are really the new generation, or the nouveau multi-engine trainers of today. You know, it's a different paradigm. But yet we're taking the same flight instructors that were taught in one, and then we're basically bringing them over here with no real growth path or no training path to basically say these are the things you have to do differently. We're leaving it up to their own devices to figure out how to do it, you know, without having the Cessna CFAI program, without having the Cirrus CSIP program. These are ones where the OEM is stepping up to the plate and saying, no, we're going to provide a certification path. We're going to have a standardization path for the flight instructors who teach in our aircraft. Okay? And that's really has set the bar. So, you know, I went through a Mooney program down in San Antonio. I've been through the Quest Kodiak one. Actually, Arlen and I helped to build that when it was coming online. And so the more you get involved with these programs, the more when you go back to your local airport, you say, wow, you know, we've got all these things. Why can't we get that out and roll that into the pilot and the training community? This is what I call the rule of 60 chart. And what it essentially is saying is if we're training someone to fly at 120 knots, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're sticking to the basics for what we're training people to do. And it's basically base 60 math, and it's like at 60 knots or whatever, you're going to go 1 mile in 1 minute. At 120, you're going to go 2 miles in 1 minute, and at 180, you're going to go in 3 in 1 minute. Okay? And so if you figure out that a index finger is approximately 5 nautical miles, okay, and you teach a student without having to pull out a plotter or an E6B to basically do a diversion in the middle of a scenario where they weren't expecting it, and basically and teach them this thing. They said, let's see, 5, 10, 15, 20, okay, so 20, I'm going 120, I'll be there in 10 minutes, boom. Okay, and so what we're trying to do is we're trying to stay focused on the basics without getting lost in the technology. If the people we're teaching can only solve a problem by going in and trying to button push their way through a solution in a panel that they never really learned all that well in the first place, what are we really doing to ourselves? So, instructional emphasis. Originally, when we were learning to fly Citabrias and old school 152s or whatever you want to call them, okay, we didn't have technology. We really only had 2 things. We had basically systems knowledge, and then we had the skills, and then we had all the ground school stuff that went along with it for the regulatory issues and those kind of things. But now what we also have is we have the technology. And so I show a simple 430 right here, and it only has 9 buttons and what, 3, a couple dual concentric knobs and a couple of flip-flop switches, right? But within the depth of the menu system of that radio, there's all kinds of features that most pilots you encounter have never been to before. And it's very easy for them to try to button push their way through to solve a problem while they're in flight, but that's not the time they should be doing it. Not when Garmin offers a free download of a simulator. Okay, so we as flight instructors have got to follow the flight simulator or the AATD or the computer training method. We've got to do that before people get in the cockpit. The cockpit is a terrible place to train people on that middle thing there. The other things we're kind of doing like the way we did before, because we have to. Okay, but one of the things that we've seen is the lack of deep system knowledge. Okay, participate or observe any flight instructor check ride or any flight instructor graduation, and you ask them anything that's off base. Okay, when I was learning to fly, you had to know the PSI in every one of those tires. You needed to know the exact, oil types that had to be in various temperature ranges. Anything that was in that AFM, you were responsible for it. That's the way it was in the 70s and 80s. What happened to that deep system knowledge? Let alone having people understand how air data computers and AHRS units work and how their interrelationship is with the temperature probe. Okay, if you drop a temperature probe, then where's that going to show up? It's going to cascade through here. Okay, so if it gets to here and there's no temperature and it shows up as 3 dashes, what's going to happen to your true airspeed calculation? Okay. Pilots that are going to be flying these things, and flight instructors especially that are going to be teaching in these things, have got to know how that stuff works. Now, I'm not saying they need to be rocket scientists, but I'm saying they need to understand the systems and the software of the avionics that they fly. No different than we would expect a Citation 10 person going through flight safety. They need to know what's going on, what's failures, and how to diagnose it. They need to know how to get through their FMS, how to set up flight plans, and how to do diversions. Okay, why is our industry any different? This picture here, I put this back up because this was me going through a scenario at Diamond. The other guy was actually one of the chief pilots of the Diamond training program at the time. And in order for me to be certified as a Diamond factory instructor, I had to go through with this particular one there for a week worth of scenarios, doing every scenario that they could possibly imagine with that G1000 DA40. Okay? And in this particular scenario right here, he was an owner that had more money than brains, right? That was the role play he was playing, and he had already paid for his aircraft, and he wanted to go home because he had a meeting, and he didn't have time for this training that we were giving them. And so they thought of every conceivable situation that they wanted to make sure that an instructor pilot representing them could go through to make sure that whoever flew that aircraft over the fence had the training necessary to be able to handle the stuff. And so, where is that kind of training? Where are we teaching that in our 141 schools? Okay, where are we trying to teach all of the interpersonal skills with the customers? Somehow we lost a lot of the graphics in here, but we'll go on. So the technology recommendations we're making for using these higher order skills in terms of using these things is, number one, you have to know your equipment blindfolded. Okay? And what I mean blindfolded is that I'm going to say I used to teach my students. I still do. I'm actually running the supply chain for AAR Airlift right now down in Melbourne, and so doing a lot of logistics work. But one of the things I always taught my students, and I did it for myself, and then I said, if you're going to come with me, this is what we're going to do. Is the first hour in every new aircraft that I ever got in, I spent with the engine off. And I was not comfortable, and I told my students, you should not be comfortable climbing in an airplane that you can't close your eyes and reach over and identify the switches. Okay, this is the avionics master, this is the taxi light, this is the landing light, this is the beacons, this is the strobe, whatever. Okay, you need to be able to know that, and you need to know your avionics just as well. You need to be able to go over and find that dual concentric knob and know that if you press it, that's bump, that turns cursor on and off. The outside knob is for scrolling, the inside knob is for twisting. And you should be able to bump, scroll, and twist your way through that thing without sitting there and staring at it. And most of us instructors who fly with people in G1000s, 430s, 530s, is that many pilots we're with, not only are they staring at it, because that's the only way that they know how to get it done, but they'll also take the bait, and while they're taxiing on the ground, they'll reach over and they'll start twisting and dialing knobs. Okay? And so those are the elements of professionalism that we need to stop here. Okay, we need to or start here, I guess, but just to make sure that those skills that would never be accepted in the airline world or the 121 or the 135 world, or even at flight safeties and simu flights and those kind of places, but yet it's perfectly acceptable at the GA level, and we need to stop. We need to get rid of that disparity of standards. So the art of managing the busy cockpit, what are we really trying to get people to do? It's the elements of single pilot resources management. First of all, have a plan. Okay? And I asked pilots, I said, is there any flight that you could possibly think of where you would get in just totally mindless and jump in this airplane, start the engine, and go off without a plan? And then at first I get people say, well, you know, when you're just going up and test flying an airplane. Oh, you're test flying an airplane after maintenance and you're going to go do that without a plan. Okay. Well, but you see what I'm saying? Have a plan first. Then you use situational awareness to say, is my plan still true? Is everything happening the way I expect it to? And if it's not, then you use aeronautical decision making, go back and then redo the plan. Now you get a diversion. You have to do something different. Things aren't the way you expected. The weather isn't what you expected. There's icing now out here. The front has moved faster. The oil pressure is running low. Whatever it is. But follow that cycle for everything you do in aviation, and that's really what the essence of what flight instructors should be teaching people to do. We have to teach people scans and flows. Okay, there's too many people out there that are flying the airplane, and instructors that must either be allowing them to do that or not dropping the gate before they go to the check ride, fully well knowing that after the check ride they're not going to use the checklist anymore. Okay, but the bottom line is that there's 4 things we need to do on a TA airplane. 3 we have to do on a regular aircraft. Okay, outside the aircraft are parameters. Traffic and terrain avoidance, primary flight display in terms of making sure that we're still at 3,000 feet and on heading 180, and the mag compass, is still in agreement with your primary electronic heading, and then the other chores that you have to do. And if you stick a multifunction display in there, now you got a 4th item. You take 1 flying minute. Remember back to base 60 math. If you're going 120, you're going 2 miles for every 1 minute, correct? So you have all those things to do, so which basically means you have 15 seconds per flying minute to do each of those things. You bump it up to 180 knots, now what happens? Now you're going 3 miles a minute. Okay? You still only have 15 seconds per minute, but think of the distance you've covered. So if you have a pilot that's out there with an electronic cockpit with whatever it looks like, it doesn't even matter. Okay? And it takes them 60 or 45 seconds to solve a button pressing problem. The faster the aircraft's going, the further that they've gone. And if they're nearing a terminal area, you can see the problems. So we have to really teach people flow and scan management. So we know that technology evolution is not going to stop. Okay? What we have to do is we, as the professionals of flight instruction, we have to look out across the landscape and say, how are we going to do things different? How am I going to make the judgments I need to on a daily basis to make sure that my students are doing the right thing? Okay? There's a concept that I coined from someone that I met that learned it in the Navy. It's called NAA. Has anyone ever heard of NAA? It stands for not aeronautically adaptable. And not aeronautically adaptable embraces the concept that not every man, woman, and child was born to fly an aircraft. And flight instructors need to be fully prepared sometimes to look someone square in the eyes and say, you know what, I don't think this is for you. I don't think we're going in the right direction. I've taken you as far as I can, and I'm sorry. But I think you should go buy a jet ski. And we should keep that in mind, because many times we're pressured by other external reasons to just keep pushing them forward and then just hope nothing happens. So with that, I thank you very much for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the McDonald's Big Mac. I have a question for you. What is a Big Mac? The Big Mac teaches us everything we need to know about what it is. The jingle defines it clearly. As a customer sitting in the drive-thru window at McDonald's, I know exactly what I'm getting when I order one. If I'm a new employee on day one at work at McDonald's, I know how to make one. It is both a sales tool and a marketing tool. It's clear, concise, complete, and correct. Now, given the Big Mac jingle and the example that we just all gave to one another here, and the fact that right off the top of our head we knew what it is, I have another question for you. What is a good instructor? When I teach flight instructor class, I pose that question. What is a good pilot? What is a good instructor? And 9 times out of 10, most people can't answer the question. They'll kind of give some ideas, they'll give some examples, but it's not clear, concise, complete, and correct. Some of us might hold up the CFI PTS and say, this is the definition of a good instructor. But others of us would say, no, that only represents the minimum requirements to pass the test. In elementary school, meeting the standards of the PTS would give us a D on a report card, still a passing test, but at the bottom of the food chain. The FAA doesn't provide a universal description of what a good instructor is. They can't. A good instructor for somebody who's flying in a Skycatcher is going to be different from somebody who is flying in a G1000-182. A good instructor flying in the bush of Alaska is going to be different than a good instructor flying in the busy airspace of Florida. But by not providing a universal definition, the FAA left the door open for us, each of us, as individuals and as an industry, to set the definition for ourselves. I fear, however, that many of us have not done that. Now, the problem is, as a trainer, I forgot to click. As a trainer, if I can't define what a good instructor is, then I can't produce it. If I can't communicate to the instructor candidate what a good instructor is, then she can't achieve it. As the chief instructor of my flight school, I can't standardize to a good instructor if I can't tell them what it is and can't share with them what I expect that customer training experience to be at my flight school. Now, each of us is free to set the standard for ourselves, but whatever it is, it shouldn't be the minimum acceptable standards to pass the test. Let me give you 2 reasons why it's important for us as an industry to move away from the PTS as the definition of a good instructor, and why it's important in preparing flight instructors for the real world of flight training. First is customer retention. Outside of the university, most general aviation customers are highly successful business people and professionals. These people, the people who can afford our flight training services, are the best in their profession, and they expect to be the best at whatever they do. And they can sniff out a minimum standards person in a heartbeat. Now take a look at the screen here. And what you have here is a screen for St. Joseph Hospital. This is a hospital in my hometown. And I currently have a doctor at my flight school taking flight training who works at St. Joe. And notice at the bottom of the screen the recognitions that his hospital has acclaimed themselves with. Notice that they are at the top of their game. Now, the reason I point this out is because I don't think that a 20-something minimum standards instructor can connect to a 40-something best of breed anything. And I think that that's one of the reasons, one of the real fundamental reasons why we have student dropouts, because there's that connection. When you get a best of breed walking into the flight school and they see these minimum standard people, they just automatically don't feel like this is where they want to be. This is not where they belong. The student won't tell you that. They can't put their finger on it. But what they do say is, my last instructor was a nice guy, but, and the but defines all of the ways that that instructor didn't meet the student's high expectations. Minimum standard instructors hurt our industry because they don't have the depth and breadth of professionalism to connect with today's savvy, sophisticated flight training customers. The second reason that we have to move away from the PTS as an industry standard is our accident rate. As a testing standard, the PTS is required to be objective and standardized, and that's good. It's the way it should be. But the real world is not always objective. It's filled with subjective details. Charlie and I flew down yesterday from Lexington into Atlanta, and the 696 looked a lot like this. Our first thought was, my goodness, I wish we'd had a student come along with us. It would have really taught them a lot about real-world flying. And almost immediately said, and the student, gosh, I wish an instructor had been along with us. It would have taught them so much about real-world flying. The PTS is fine as a testing standard. It doesn't need to be changed, but it really doesn't do the job as a training standard, and that is for us to come up with. Now, I'm not a proponent of more regulations. You can't rate excellence with regulations. It comes from here. It comes from the heart. Now, unless you're a Marine, you may not feel comfortable talking about achieving excellence. Let's face it, this is not something that's really promoted in our society these days. In search of excellence is not something that's taught in most schools. So when a new instructor shows up on my doorstep, I have to teach it to him. When a new student shows up on my doorstep, I have to teach it to him. I have to start at the beginning and teach it at every phase. Otherwise, the idea of being the best is just something that they have no prior concept to. We have to preach that you don't have to be minimum standards. You don't have to be average. You can be the best of the best. And you know, the funny thing is, it doesn't take any more time. It doesn't cost any more money. As a flight instructor, I don't say, hold your altitude plus or minus 100 feet. I say, while we're doing this, we're going to hold our altitude. It comes down to creating a culture. The Boy Scouts did it. Take a look at the screen. These are the requirements to become an Eagle Scout. This is the best of best in scouting. I'd like to remind you that most Eagle Scouts are 17 years old or younger. And look at this. They talk about living with principles, earning merit badges, being active for 6 months, leadership, and life's purposes. If they can make citizens out of 17-year-olds, surely we can do it. And that's really what we're talking about here, is making good aviation citizens. These are not mandated by any federal regulation. It's the scouting culture, being your highest self. And I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think it's something worth achieving here. Any flight school can have a similar standard. It's up to us as an instructor to take an oath. I will not sign off anybody until he's a good instructor. It's up to each of us as a flight school to take an oath. I'm not going to hire a minimum standards instructor. And it's up to us as an industry to set an example of what is a good instructor. Because unless it's defined, they can't achieve it. We don't have to fix the whole world. I only have to fix my piece of it. And Mike has to fix his piece of it. And Jeff fixes his piece of it. And if you do yours and yours and yours, we'll cover the whole world. So I don't want you to think about this as being a monumental task, because it's not. So what qualities do you think are required over the PTS that a good instructor should have? Well, I'm sure you're going to have a different set of items than I, but I'll tell you what's on my list. Work ethic. Hard work still counts. There are no shortcuts in becoming good. Don't encourage looking for the shortcuts. Instead, stress the importance of working hard and doing it right. Business sense. We operate in a business. Like it or not, we can be friendly, but our customers aren't paying for a friend. We have to deliver a good product. Respect. They have to have respect for their peers, respect for their customers, and respect for the experience of the aviation, shall we call ourselves, elders. Again, respect is not often taught or emphasized these days. Politeness. Yes, ma'am, thank you, and other pleasantries that Mama should have taught him, but maybe didn't. We might have to teach. Stand up straight, smile, and have a good handshake. Things that Daddy should have taught him, but maybe they didn't, and we may have to include. A student for life is something that you and I know are important, but so many instructors today leave school thinking that they've learned it all. Each of us here have to have a jingle to sing about what a good instructor is, because only when we know what the ingredients are can we really put it together. So here is my challenge. I was given a title, How to Prepare Flight Instructors for Real-World Training. There's 1,000 things I coulda, woulda, shoulda talked about, but I only had 10 minutes and I've already exhausted that. But here's the thing. This is such a basic, universal truth that it goes beyond anything else that I could have talked about. Because if we can just preach getting away from the PTS as the standard and becoming the best of the best, that'll take care of everything. So my challenge to you tonight is to define for yourself what is a good instructor, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you.
Great presentation, Arlen. Thank you. Arlen had some great messages, and everybody up here has had some great messages. I've been taking some notes, so I'll just, I think, speak from the notes instead of talking about what I was assigned to talk about, which is recurrent versus initial CFIs. I was just recently retired as a DPE in the St. Louis VSDO, where I spent 10 years giving check rides, some to CFIs. And a lot of what we're talking about today applies to flight instructors. How many of you out there are flight instructors? Current flight instructors, past flight instructors? How many of you have ever taken a FERC? Most of you, right? How many of you have renewed without taking a FERC? A few. Okay. Well, I'll explain here as we go along some of my thoughts and philosophies about that, giving a number of check rides for flight instructors. In St. Louis FSDO, for a period of time, we had an 80% failure rate for initial CFIs. And it goes to the heart of what we're all talking about, 80%. I've had kind of a privileged life in aviation. Started out flying in high school, but along the way was in the service. But kind of got sidetracked into the accident investigation world in the Navy. About 20-some years ago, my commanding officer sucked me off into a room and said, "You're going to be my next safety officer, and you're going to school out at Monterey and learn how to be an accident investigator," and so on and so forth, which led to a career for the last 20-some years as an aircraft accident investigator, which has paralleled my career as a flight instructor. In addition to being a flight instructor and given many private pilot endorsements and instrument endorsements, and then I got involved with Tom Turner's group doing Bonanza transition training, etc. I've been an accident investigator, and through the last 20 years I've investigated over 500 aircraft accidents, most of which are GA. Probably over 1,000 fatalities that I've seen. So talk a little bit about some of that. I had an interesting conversation with Bob out in the hall. I'll share that with you. Flying, we've talked about cost. Flying has never been and never will be, in my opinion, cheap or easy. How many people think we can make it cheap and easy? None. I believe personally, I have a little saying, I think we are in a race to the bottom, trying to make it cheaper and easier. We are in a race to the bottom. I went to my daughter's graduation about 10 years ago. 75% of the kids in her graduating class had a 4.0 grade point average or better. Statistically impossible. Okay? And that's what we're doing in aviation. Everybody gets an A. Everybody passes their knowledge test. Okay? As a designated examiner, I get the knowledge test. I just see that they have one, and it's not expired. And then it goes in the round file. Why? I'll tell you a little story. Now, I've given a number of check rides, not a world's record along the way, and I'm sure Alan can agree about some of these stories. Guy comes in, sits down, takes a check ride. And I always tell him in the prep, it's an open book exam. You can bring anything you want. I recommend you bring the list that's in the PTS, because we'll be talking about those items. Young man comes in, sits down. He has a FAR AIM book in the wrapper. I said, okay. I said, how come it's still in the wrapper? He says, well, I just bought it. Oh, that's good. I said, have you read it? He says, not really. He says, but if you don't ask me any questions, I can take it back. So, never has been cheap or easy. Second guy comes in, he was a little smarter because he went to either John and Martha or he went to another provider. And he had, of course, studied the knowledge test exam guide because he brought that. And he was a lot brighter than the other guy because he brought the oral exam guide. You know what that is? That's the prep on how to take the check ride. That was the only two books he brought. So I asked him a question, and he starts fumbling through the oral exam guide. It's not in there, pal. Check ride didn't get any better after that. And that's what we're dealing with. And I don't know, Doug, did you mention the survey that you did recently that you discussed a couple weeks ago at AFS 630? It's an interesting story. Examiners and DPEs examiners and instructors, significant difference of opinion about whether applicants should have prior knowledge of test questions. Okay? Because what we're seeing, and I had, on the way back from our AFS 630 meeting out in Oklahoma City 2 weeks ago, and John and Martha and several other people in the audience were there, I had a chance to ride back to the airport with a gentleman who has a company selling training materials, manuals. He said they sell three exam guides, test prep guides, for every one source document. 3 to 1. So, cheap and easy. We can't do it. Initial and recurrent. These are the requirements, okay? We set rather low goals for ourselves. In the Navy, we used to call it, when we had to hand out the annual evaluation forms that the young junior officer had to fill out and then give back to his boss to get his evaluation. Get one across your desk that says, junior officer so-and-so set low goals which he failed to achieve. So when you can renew in your bathrobe, it tells me we've got an issue, okay? Like I said a few minutes ago, I've been giving FERC training for the last 15 years in St. Louis. Mike's participated many times in these get-togethers. And I always ask the question I ask you at the beginning. How many of you renewed with the FERC? Okay? Of course, they're all there renewing with the FERC. Two kinds of instructors, if we're talking about this stuff. Instructors, they're like us, that renew via the FERC, okay? They come every couple years. They go through the 16 hours. Some of you can remember when it was 24 painful hours. And that was pretty much it, or there were a couple other methods. And then there's the other instructor. What is the other instructor? And I think, Arlen, you mentioned you had a bunch in your activity, et cetera. But you kind of polish those stones that come into your activity, and after a while they become an instructor. But the other instructor is a person who's not around long enough in the industry to qualify to go to a FERC. They haven't been there for 2 years. They don't need it. Where are they? They're sitting in that airplane you rode down here on, in the right seat, okay, making those great decisions, okay? What happened to the guys and gals doing the FERCs? They're not teaching anymore. They're just in there renewing. All that knowledge, where is it? You know, flush, okay? So we've got to do something. I don't know what the answer is about this. I have some ideas. I'll share with them with you tomorrow. But anyway, just remember the little thing at the bottom. We are in the third most dangerous occupation in the country, okay? And as an accident investigator, I see that every day, and it's tragic. For those of you who are interested, go to the ntsb.gov website. Look up a Cirrus accident that occurred in Lindsay, Oklahoma. Where's Cirrus? You're my customer. Where's Cessna? You're my customer. I have lots of customers in this room. Actually, I make more money on dead pilots than live pilots, but that's a different story. But anyway, can we make it any easier? Can we make it any cheaper? Probably not, okay? The question is, should we? Or should we raise our standards? Here's some experience gained by teaching, okay? These are actual CFIs. Mike, they used to be yours. And these were their experience that they advertised on the web for their students, okay? We have a population of instructors that have, and these are 61, I think maybe 141. Christy, who's now an airline captain, and Jake, who's still in the flight instruction industry. But you can see 261 hours, 350 hours, et cetera. And I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm just saying these are the facts, okay? These are the students that are populating, or the instructors that are populating the flight schools. There is some good to the youngsters because they know how to tweet. They know how to Twitter. More importantly, they know the stuff that's in the new cockpits. Do you? Okay? Do you know? How many of you have flown with a Garmin 1000? How many of you have flown with an Avidyne R9, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, well that's just the name of the box. Do you know how many different versions of software are in those things? Okay, and that's just the certified stuff. How many of you have taught experimental amateur built? Okay, there's a couple. There's one of my guys right there. Guess what? There's a whole bunch of EAB stuff out there, Dynons and Grand Rapids and all these other things that are in the fleet. And what's the common question you get from the students? Do you know how to operate this thing? And they flew it 500 miles to get there to talk to you about it. Inexperience hurts. It really hurts. 37% of all our accident pilots had fewer than 500 total hours. Okay? These are numbers that go across the board. 50% of all of our accidents in GA occur to private pilots. Private pilots populate less than 1/3 of the total pilot population and probably fly less than 20 to 25% of the total hours. Yet they have half of the accidents. So the private pilots are way out of whack. And why is that? No training, no experience. Where does this end up? Some really old guys figured this out a long time ago. And here we are 100 years later rehashing the same story. Or as I say, you get what you pay for. I know I have just a few minutes left. An accident I worked years and years ago, a beach product, young instructor. Important thing at the bottom. How many Navy guys in here? Couple? What's that acronym mean? If you went through flight school, you know what it is? Huh? On board with this mission, let's go out and kill ourselves. It happens, right? We've all seen it. Guy's doing a signature takeoff. You ever seen a 150 at your local 3,000-foot strip? Guy gets airborne in about 900 feet, puts it down in ground effect and accelerates about to 65 knots, and then he honks it up in the air. Gets about 50 feet before it goes this, and then he levels off. And he's really cool. Instructor, in this case, failed every check ride he ever took. Okay? And yet, what do we call him at the end of the day? Flight instructor. All the students knew what was going on. The flight school management did not. Any flight school owners in here, make sure you know what's going on in your flight school. Last slide. We are in the race to the bottom, as I mentioned. 20 years. Actually, I gave this presentation, or one very similar to it, 7 years ago at UND. How many people were at that meeting? The cigar meeting. I know John and Martha were, et cetera. We talked about a lot of these things, but things have changed. And I'll tell you, they haven't gotten a lot better. Glass has come out. Everybody thought it was going to save the bacon, make things a lot safer. Has it? No. In 1990, 20 years ago, we had 63,000 CFIs. Today, we have, well, that got messed up a little bit. We have over 94,000 CFIs. Okay? We've grown the CFI industry by 50%. Okay? We've gone from 128,000 students down to 70-some thousand. We've dropped that quite a bit. Okay? Look at the numbers. We have more CFIs than we have students. Okay? Better than a 1-to-1 ratio. You can't pack that many people in a Remos or a 162. Okay? Where are these guys going? These guys and gals going? Why are they getting CFI tickets? I think everybody knows the answer to that one. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thank you very much. Have a great next day and a half, and really participate. One last story I'll share with you. My sister passed away last year from cancer, a long battle of cancer. And I got a chance to talk to her when she was in hospice. And one thing she told me, and Arlen kind of reflected on this at the end of her talk. We can only affect, what she told me, what is within our circle. Think about what is within your circle and what you can change. We can't all individually fix all these problems. Collectively, we can change a lot. Individually, we can change quite a bit if we're willing to get out there and work a little bit on these things. And the people that you see up here have worked really hard through the years to make positive change. And I know a lot of you are doing the same thing. I applaud you for that. Thank you very much.
And finally, Mossy.
Hello. So I'm going to try something a little different. Where's the little clicker here?
No, right there.
This it? How does this work?
Big button forward.
Big button forward, huh? All right. Does this come off? It does. All right, hang on. See if I can pull this. Hang on a minute. I'm going to go around the side. Okay, I'm kind of last. For those of you who kind of know me, let me try the little clicker here, see if it'll advance. There we go. Okay, so I'm Mossy, and they've asked me to give a little talk. I'm the 2010 National CFI of the Year. I kind of specialize in transitioning single-engine piston pilots into single-pilot jets. So they asked me to do a little talking about technology, but, you know, I thought I'm supposed to come here and give you my perspective, right? So for those of you who know me, I love to give my opinion, and I'm usually pretty vocal about it. So I'm going to start to talk about an issue that is really near and dear to me, and I'm going to really appeal to the people in this audience today. So I think technology is a lovely thing. We certainly are seeing that people that are flying technically advanced aircraft aren't running out of gas anymore, and that's always a nice thing. I think synthetic vision is great. You certainly look at the Cirrus. We have lovely weather here on the Garmin G1000, our ability to put all kinds of fancy METARs up and air mets, make sure nothing happens to you. I think planes like the Cirrus SR-22 are wonderful. I can't tell you how many pilots I've met over the years at CPPs that have come up to me and said, God, Mossy, I got to tell you, this Cirrus plane is great. I flew in the 60s and the 70s, and because of planes like the Cirrus or like the Cessna Corvallis, I got back into flying. So yes, I think that's all great, but I want to read you something. This is from the May edition of AOPA's new flight training magazine. How many people have seen this magazine now that's out? It's a great magazine. They rehashed it. Oh, Jennifer, you've seen it? Excellent. Hey. It's good to know. So I want to read you all something, right? I'm sitting in bed a couple weeks ago preparing for this presentation, and here it is. Everybody hear me all right? All right, great. Here we go. Congratulations to you on making it work, the March 2011 edition of Flight Training Magazine, and the whole publication. Last week, my flight instructor, the fourth so far, signed me off to take my check ride. It's been a long road. I soloed in March 2007. The 4-year endeavor, which has now cost me nearly $13,000, is because of the lack of organized syllabus from the flight school. The two owner instructors are old school, who, being the only game in town, rest on their laurels and are unmotivated to improve. This school has a sign outside, Cessna Flight Center. I think to uphold the fine reputation of Cessna, the company should perform periodic assessments of each of its schools that display the sign. They should have mandatory curricula or syllabi with study materials available to compete with online sales. They should have flight simulators at a level they can afford. George Stevenson, Santa Fe, New Mexico. So I'm reading that thinking, whoa, that's kind of interesting. That's kind of what I want to talk about, right? So let me tell you a story about my friend Kim. My friend Kim is an extremely accomplished producer, director, cinematographer, and editor. Some of you may be familiar with her movie that she edited, 1-6 Right? She was the sole editor on that movie. She called me on the phone a couple months ago. We both work in the entertainment business. It's kind of a side thing for me because I live in Hollywood, right? And she calls me on the phone and says, I want you to be my mentor. So that means she goes into my calendar, and at 5 p.m. every Sunday, I pick up the phone and I call her, and I want to find out what's going on with her flying, right? And what do I come to find out as I sit down with her to find out, well, what's been going on in the 6 months she's been trying to get her private pilot's license? Guess what? She has no syllabus. She's been with 2 or 3 different instructors. Oh, they're not young kids. They're seasoned veterans of flight, and she has no syllabus, none whatsoever. So me, I whip out one of these little flight training records. Cessna has them, Jeppesen has them, right? How many people here have seen these before? It's a great little thing. You know what's great about it? You can hold it up with your student and say, would you like to see what your private pilot check ride's going to look like? It's going to start off like this, and they're going to check this box, etc. It took me about 20, 30 minutes to start checking boxes. And you should have seen the look on her face. You know, it was like, oh my God. I said, that's what this process is? Yes, I'm sorry that you've been 6 months into the process of trying to get your private, and you have no clue where you're at and where you're going. So I asked this question to you, right? What is Kim's issue with flying? She's not flying to a syllabus or training course outline that's giving her a sense of being engaged or a sense of progress towards her goal. She has no clue where she's at in the process and what is next. So how can she see herself making progress towards her goal? And by the way, that goal is getting her private pilot certificate. I don't understand how you can see that. Right? She's ready to quit. So I first started, I've been a CSIP, this thing you keep hearing today. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. Been a CSIP ever since the program came out, and I was one of the first CFIIs in the country to start doing glass cockpit instrument ratings. As soon as the plane hit the market with the Aviation Flight Max Integra, boom, my phone rang, and people said, Mossy, come do my instrument rating in the SR-22 since you teach on glass cockpit jets. You probably could pull it off, right? Well, at the time, there was no syllabus for glass cockpit instrument ratings. So I made my own training course outline, right? I had a copy of it. My student had a copy of it. And at the end of each lesson, we checked off together what got done. So my student always knew where they were at and where they were going and what the next lesson was going to be. Brilliant, right? All right. So, I'm sure a lot of people are sitting here going, well, hey, Mossy, hang on a second. Isn't that what, Part 141 is for, to have a syllabus, right? Okay, so I'll give this to you. Benefits of 141. You've got a mandatory training course outline known as a TCO. There's stage checks, and there's more structure, right? And when you look at Part 61 versus Part 141, no syllabus, no stage checks. The screen kind of bumps like that. No, just kidding. Number one common complaint you hear from people training in 61 is that the CFIs are teaching by the seat of their pants. That the standard opening line when the CFI gets in the plane is, hey, what do you want to do today? Or the other line, which is, dude, what did we do last time, right? Everybody heard that before, right? And common complaints about GA? Okay, so I went and talked to a bunch of Part 61 CFIs preparing for this, right? All over the country. Different types of Cessna Pilot Centers, Cirrus Training Centers, whole 9 yards. And here's what I got. CFI said to me, the bottom line was, hey, listen, I don't have access to a syllabus without paying a bunch of money. And then I said, well, wait a minute. The Cessna Pilot Center CFIs and the Cirrus Standardized Instructors, those are the CSIs that are found at Cirrus Training Centers, right, don't have an excuse. Till I got this feedback from those people, which was, yeah, but listen, if they come in the door and I say, buy this little training kit here for $2.99 or buy the Cirrus kit here for $3.99, etc., many people say, you know what, if that's another 2 hours in the air for me with the instructor, I'm going to pass on the training kit till I see that I really like to do this. Well, guess what? If they don't end up buying the training kit that comes with the syllabus, there's no syllabus, right? So we're back to where we started. All right, so here comes an interesting story to almost wrap it up. Perfect. All right. I talked to a CFI who learned in a big 141 university system. When he joined the 141 system, big university system, he had a 2-day orientation on how to use the TCO. The university had a system set up that if he didn't do the training record at the end of the day, it stopped him, the student he flew with, and even the airplane from flying. I thought, that's kind of nice, a little gate system there, right? The CFI was allowed to deviate from the TCO in areas that obviously the school recognized people were going to have difficulty on. Because of that, the CFI used the training course outline to the letter. The CFI then leaves the university system, goes to a 141 certificated school in New York, starts teaching there, never saw a syllabus. It's a 141 certificated school. So because the CFI was taught to use the syllabus, he got the Jeppesen syllabus and used it. This CFI is now at a Part 61 Cirrus Training Center, where the chief flight instructor wrote his own TCO. The school only does Cirrus training. They have a 90% pass rate on private and instruments. 90 percentile. That's huge. All right? So what's a possible solution here? A lot of CFIs said, look, get the FAA to give us a free syllabus. Tons of people said, have it go up on the FAAsafety.gov. A lot of people said, not only that, get it linked into the wing system. Free access to CFIs on board. I would love to see a national campaign that basically says, hey, use a syllabus. It benefits you and it benefits your flight school. I would love to see maybe the FAA grant SAFE some kind of a grant to use it. And finally, the story of my friend Marcia. So I'm in Texas about 1.5 years ago. A friend of mine's got a big man cave, 2 jets, 2 this, 2 that. He says to me, hey, Mossy, since you're here on business, I need a favor. I want you to go have dinner with my wife. I'm like, you want me to take your wife out on a date? And he says, no, listen. He says, my wife last year bought a Cessna 172, and she's been trying to get her private pilot's license in it, and she's having difficulty, and I want the 2 of you to go to dinner. So I go to dinner with her. You should know something about Marcia. Marcia's got her own $10 million company. Forget the husband and his money. Her own $10 million company. And I sit down with her and I say, so what's the deal? She goes, well, Mossy, I got my own 172. It's not like I don't have an airplane problem, but I've been through 4 CFIs. Guess what? No syllabus. She's never seen a syllabus. Whipped out syllabus, you know. I like to use Sky Roamers if I'm doing somebody's private. Never saw one. Same kind of thing, right? So I'm basically right now appealing to the people in this audience. On behalf of my friend Marcia and my friend Kim, can we please find some way to get CFIs to use a syllabus? It benefits the students and it benefits everyone in this room. Thank you.
Thank you very much.